He was the smallest one in the family. The one nobody thought to call in from the fields when a king's messenger showed up looking for a future ruler. The one his own father almost forgot he had. He would grow up to kill a giant with a rock. He would be hunted like an animal by the very king he once served. He would write songs so raw and honest that people are still reading them 3,000 years later. He would become the greatest king his nation ever had. And he would also lie, cheat, and orchestrate a man's death to cover up an affair. This is not a story about a perfect hero. This is a story about a man after God's own heart, and what that phrase actually means when you watch how messy, how human, and how real his life truly was. This is the story of David. To understand David, you have to understand Israel before him. At this point in the story, Israel had a king already. A tall, impressive man named Saul. Saul looked like a king. He was head and shoulders above everyone else, the kind of man you'd pick out of a crowd instantly. But looking like a leader and actually leading well are two very different things, and Saul had started making choices that pulled him away from God. He grew proud. He stopped listening. And so, quietly, without any public announcement, God sent the prophet Samuel on a secret mission. Go find the next king. Samuel didn't get an address. He got a family. Go to Bethlehem, God told him, to a man named Jesse. One of his sons will be king. The anointing. So Samuel travels to Bethlehem, and Jesse, probably nervous about why a famous prophet is knocking on his door, brings his sons out one at a time. The oldest, Eliab, walks out first, and he's got the look. Tall, strong, confident. Samuel actually thinks to himself, this has to be the one. But God tells him no. Jesse brings out son after son. 7 of them walk past Samuel. 7 times God says no. Finally Samuel asks, a little confused, is that everyone? And Jesse says essentially, well, there's the youngest, but he's out with the sheep. Nobody had even bothered to call him in. That's how little anyone expected of him. They send for him anyway, and in walks David, young, ruddy-faced, probably still smelling like the pasture. And God tells Samuel, this is the one. Anoint him. So right there, in front of his brothers, Samuel pours oil on David's head. It's a quiet, strange moment. Just an old prophet, some olive oil, and a teenage shepherd who has no idea his entire life just changed. David goes right back to the sheep the next day. He doesn't become king. Not yet. Not for years. He just goes back to work, carrying a secret that must have felt almost impossible to believe. Here's something worth sitting with. David spent years as a shepherd before he became anything else. And that job shaped him more than people realize. Shepherding wasn't a peaceful, pastoral hobby. It was dangerous. David would later describe fighting off lions and bears with his bare hands to protect his flock. He learned patience out there. He learned to fight. He learned to be alone with his thoughts, which is probably where a lot of his songs, the Psalms, started forming in his head, long before he ever wrote them down. So when we meet him next, he's not some overnight sensation. He's a kid who's already been quietly tested, in the dark, with no audience. Meanwhile, Israel is at war with the Philistines, and the Philistines have brought out their secret weapon. A man named Goliath. This isn't an exaggeration for effect. Goliath was enormous, somewhere around 9 feet tall by most ancient accounts, wearing bronze armor so heavy it would have crushed an average man just to carry it. Every single morning, for 40 days straight, Goliath walks out into the valley between the two armies and shouts the same challenge. Send me a man. Let's settle this one-on-one. Whoever loses, that side surrenders. And every single morning, the entire army of Israel looks at this walking tank of a man and quietly backs away. Nobody volunteers. Not the officers, not the strongest soldiers, nobody. 40 days of humiliation. Enter David. David isn't even part of the army, he's too young. He's back home tending sheep again, while his 3 oldest brothers are out at the battle lines. One day his father sends him with supplies for his brothers and orders to check in on how the war is going. David shows up right as Goliath is doing his daily routine of shouting insults at the entire nation of Israel. And David, this teenager who's just there to drop off bread and cheese, looks around at all these grown, trained soldiers frozen in fear and says, essentially, wait, nobody's going to do anything about this guy? Who even is this Philistine that he gets to talk to the army of the living God like that? His older brother Eliab is embarrassed and snaps at him, tells him to go back to his sheep, accuses him of just wanting to watch a fight. But word gets back to King Saul that there's some kid asking why nobody will fight the giant. Saul sends for him, the offer nobody expects. Standing in front of the actual king, David says he'll fight Goliath himself. Saul looks at him like he's lost his mind. You're a boy. He's been a warrior since he was young. Completely reasonable objection. David's answer is the key to his whole character. He doesn't say, I'm brave or I'm strong. He says, I've killed lions and bears protecting my father's sheep. God delivered me from them. God will deliver me from this Philistine too. It's not confidence in himself. It's confidence in what he's already seen God do, applied to a bigger problem. That distinction matters for everything that comes after in David's life. Goliath sees this kid walking toward him and is honestly insulted. He mocks David, curses him, tells him he's going to feed his body to the birds. David's response is one of the most quoted lines in the whole story. You come at me with sword and spear, but I come at you in the name of the Lord of armies. And then, without hesitation, he runs, not walks, runs, straight at Goliath. He slings one stone. It hits Goliath in the forehead. The giant drops face first to the ground. David doesn't even have a sword of his own, so he takes Goliath's own blade and finishes the job with it. The Philistine army, watching their champion just get dropped by a teenager with a rock, panics and flees. Israel's army chases them down. What looked like a 40-day standoff ends in about 40 seconds. And just like that, the shepherd boy nobody called in from the fields becomes a national hero overnight. You'd think this is where the story gets easy for David. It's actually where it gets hard. He becomes close friends with Saul's son, Jonathan. And this friendship is genuinely one of the most touching relationships in the whole Bible. Jonathan, who by birthright should have been the next king, instead loves David like a brother and consistently protects him, even though it costs him his own claim to the throne. But Saul is a different story. As David's popularity grows, women start literally singing songs in the streets. Saul has killed his thousands, David his 10,000s. Saul's pride curdles into paranoia, and paranoia curdles into hatred. He becomes convinced David is trying to steal his throne. And so the king who once welcomed David into his court now spends years trying to kill him. Life as a fugitive. This starts a long, exhausting chapter of David's life where he's basically homeless, living in caves, hiding in the wilderness, gathering a ragtag band of followers, always one step ahead of Saul's army. Twice during this period, David actually gets the chance to kill Saul himself. Once in a cave, where he sneaks up close enough to cut a piece off Saul's robe without Saul even noticing. Once in Saul's own camp at night, where David and one of his men walk right up to the sleeping king. Both times, David's men tell him this is clearly God handing Saul over to him. Both times, David refuses. Eventually, Saul and Jonathan both die in the same battle against the Philistines. And David's reaction isn't celebration, it's genuine grief. He writes a funeral song for them, mourning Jonathan especially with words that have echoed for centuries. How the mighty have fallen. Even for the man who spent years trying to kill him, David doesn't gloat. He grieves. After years on the run, David is finally officially made king. First over one tribe, then eventually over the whole nation of Israel. The shepherd boy from Bethlehem is now sitting on the throne he was anointed for as a teenager, more than a decade earlier. As king, David does what almost nobody expected. He captures Jerusalem and makes it his capital. He brings Israel's most sacred object, the Ark of the Covenant, into the city, and he's so overcome with joy that he dances through the streets in celebration. Not exactly composed, dignified royal behavior, but completely unguardedly himself. He unites the tribes, expands the kingdom, and becomes the standard every future king of Israel gets measured against. This is also, most likely, the period where many of his most famous songs, the Psalms, take shape. Poems about fear, joy, guilt, gratitude, doubt, and trust in God. They're raw in a way religious writing often isn't. And then comes the part of David's story that changes everything. One evening, David is on his palace roof and sees a woman named Bathsheba bathing nearby. He sends for her. She becomes pregnant. There's just one significant problem. Bathsheba is married to one of David's own soldiers, a loyal man named Uriah, who is off fighting in David's war at that very moment. Instead of coming clean, David tries to cover it up. He calls Uriah home from the battlefield, hoping he'll spend a night with his wife so the pregnancy can be explained away. But Uriah, out of loyalty to his fellow soldiers still out on the front lines, refuses to go home and enjoy comfort while they're sleeping in open fields. He won't take the easy way out, which is exactly what David was counting on him to do. So David escalates. He sends Uriah back to the battle with a sealed letter. A letter Uriah himself carries, never knowing it contains his own death sentence. The letter orders the commander to put Uriah in the most dangerous part of the fighting, then pull the support away from him. Uriah dies exactly as planned. David has effectively murdered a loyal, innocent man to cover up his own affair. Then the prophet Nathan shows up. Nathan doesn't walk in and accuse the king directly. That would be a death sentence for a prophet. Instead, he tells David a story. A rich man with huge flock steals and slaughters the one single lamb belonging to his poor neighbor, just to feed a guest, instead of using any of his own animals. David, furious, says the man deserves to die for such cruelty. And Nathan looks him dead in the eye and says 4 words that change everything. "You are that man." David doesn't make excuses. He doesn't blame Bathsheba. He doesn't have Nathan executed for the insult. He simply says, "I have sinned against the Lord." That's it. Nathan tells him that because of what he's done, tragedy will follow his household for the rest of his life. And it does. The child from the affair dies as an infant, and David grieves deeply. Years later, his own son Amnon assaults his half-sister Tamar, and then Tamar's full brother Absalom murders Amnon in revenge. Absalom eventually turns against his own father completely, leading an actual rebellion to steal the throne, forcing David to flee Jerusalem as a refugee in his own kingdom, chased out by his own son. Absalom is eventually killed in the ensuing battle, and even after everything, the rebellion, the betrayal, the attempt to take his throne and his life, David is devastated. His grief for his rebellious son is some of the rawest emotion in the whole story. My son, if only I had died instead of you." David's later years are marked by that ongoing family chaos, political struggles over who will succeed him, and his own declining health. Eventually, his son Solomon, Bathsheba's son, the child born after the one they lost, is anointed as the next king, fulfilling a promise David had made. David dies having reigned for 40 years, leaving behind a kingdom at the height of its power and a legacy so significant that centuries later, people are still describing the coming Messiah as a descendant of the house of David. So what do you actually do with a story like this? David killed a giant with nothing but faith and a sling. He showed restraint most people never could, sparing the life of a king actively trying to murder him. He danced in the streets out of pure, unfiltered joy. And he also arranged a man's death to hide his own sin, and paid for it in family tragedy for the rest of his life. That's exactly why his story has survived for 3,000 years. It's not a fairy tale about a perfect man. It's the story of someone who did extraordinary good and devastating wrong, sometimes within the same lifetime, sometimes within the same year. And when he was confronted with his failure, he didn't run from it, he owned it. Maybe that's the real reason he's remembered as a man after God's own heart. Not because he never fell, but because of what he did when he did.